immigrants, how many immigrants are in prison? And then you start reading the report, and every year except 1925, Hispanics are counted as white. That's one report. Another one, the GAO, I mean, the congressional investigators had to ask the GAO to count, to tell us, because the Department of Justice didn't have it, the Bureau of Prisons didn't have it. So the GAO, they've done a couple of massive investigations, but on closer examination, they're counting illegal and legal immigrants, which I think we should do, in the federal prison, but in the much larger state system, they're counting only illegal immigrants for whom the states have requested reimbursement, only illegal immigrants for whom the states have requested reimbursement who have committed at least one felony or 2 misdemeanors. You know, we're not getting anchor babies. We're not getting the children of the ones, not even the children, but the ones amnestied by Reagan. No, I want to know. I think we have a right to know, and I think the last few weeks, now that, thank you Donald Trump, he's brought it to the fore, and the shooting in San Francisco, people are thinking, yeah, how many are there? Incidentally, I spent the weekend and a lot of money looking up these reports. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen some of this. Liberals keep aggressively asserting on TV, well, studies show immigrants commit less crime than Americans do. Now, I know that's not true. What I don't know is how they're lying, so I wanted to know, and I try to get the reports. Well, first of all, you ought to be suspicious that one of the arguments they're making is, well, New York City has a lot of immigrants, and I don't see a lot of crime here. That's not a study. That's not science. It's retarded. And, you know, Geraldo was making that argument with me, and Geraldo is not a stupid man, so the facts must not be very good. But anyway, I try looking for the studies, and I put in, sometimes you'd get a reference to the name of a researcher, and then I was looking on Nexus to try to see where are these studies, can I see what they're saying? And you'll get a professor from such and such a university, well, I just did a study, and it turns out first-generation immigrants commit far less crime than Americans. But they're all hidden. So I'd track down the study. They're all hidden behind paywalls. And, you know, I'm already paying for Scribd, for Nexus, for a billion different services. So first I wasted 2 hours thinking, come on, you're not going to make me pay $50 for this crap-ass study. But, yeah, I had to keep paying $50 just so I could skim down, find out what the lie is, which is what I'm probably going to tell you all about in my column this week, but I'll tell you right now. They are not looking at Americans. They are looking at criminal Americans.
Yep.
I mean, they have different ways of doing it, but one guy, and the big headline, and he's being quoted in the Dallas Morning News and the New York Times, well, my study showed first-generation immigrants, far less crime than Americans, the native-born Americans. So then you see what he looked at. He's looking at the trajectory, as he says. So the base population were juvenile offenders. So this is someone who has already been convicted of a crime, which he admits, well, my base study began with 45% blacks, 33% Hispanics, and 15% whites. That's not a cross-section of America. That's a cross-section of our criminal population. The other ones will, you know, pick a city at random and look at the native-born Americans versus immigrants. Let's take Detroit. What? Wait, I'm sorry. Do you think I'm not going to point out that the black underclass has a very high crime rate? Because I'm going to point it out. No, I'm thinking we want immigrants to have, to not just beat the black crime rate. I want them beating the Norwegian crime rate. I mean, why should I'm skipping all past this, all lies. I'm skipping past this to get to the point. Why are any criminals coming in? No, we have our own criminals. We don't need more. Because, again, the topic sentence on any discussion about immigration, it is a government policy like any other. It ought to be used to benefit the people here. If you are bringing in one child molester, one drunk driver, one person who needs government services, or English language lessons, that are going to have to be paid for by the taxpayers. That is not helping the people already here. I mean, there's ones they keep talking about, you know, the hardworking ones that don't commit crimes, and, you know, they're working so hard and supporting their family of 4 and sending half of their $8 an hour salary home, and, you know, that's fantastic. They're very admirable. But how does it help America? No, it doesn't. They're using schools and services and hospitals and medical services and the housing aid, and they're sending, immigrants to America, both legal and illegal, are sending $20 billion back to Mexico every year. That's funding Carlos Slim, who saved the New York Times from bankruptcy, another chapter in my book. You know, Carlos Slim makes money off of immigration, especially illegal immigration, to the United States. $20 billion, that is a cost of immigration you will never be told about. $20 billion being sucked out of the American economy. That is money that will never be used to buy an American product, to hire an American worker, to purchase an American house, or tip an American you know, busboy. No, that is just being sucked out of the American economy. We ought to just, you know, tax Americans. I mean, it takes a circuitous route from American taxpayers to the U.S. government to the low-wage immigrants who need the support from the taxpayers. That's why they can take those low-wage jobs, who, you know, lives in an apartment with 5 other immigrants and then sends it back to Chiapas, his grandmother, who then buys Carlos Slim products. Carlos Slim owns 40% of the companies on the Mexican Stock Exchange, so he needs that money in Mexico. They then buy a Carlos Slim product, and it goes into Carlos Slim's pocket. So why don't, can we just, you know, write a check to Carlos Slim?
So for people who don't know, and I didn't know until I read your book, Ann, can you tell the kind of the story of American immigration? Because you referenced it earlier. You know, obviously, for me, as a Jew, that means that my great-grandparents got here in 1907, I believe, and so the easy thing is to buy into illegal immigration bad, legal immigration good, because my grandparents and great-grandparents came legally. Can you explain why that is no longer the case, why even legal immigration needs to be curtailed?
Yes, and by the way, your people are great other than the way they vote. Hey, you have really a lot of brains, really helps the country.
The ones who vote that way ain't my people.
That's true. Well, it used to be, as Ben and I'm sure his grandparents are an example, pre-1970, immigrants were, as any immigration policy would require, better than us. That's what we want. We want immigrants way better than us. Immigrants pre-1970 were more educated, made more money, bought more houses, and 30% of them went home. Just take that fact alone. 30% of them couldn't make it and went home. We looked out across the world and skimmed the cream from the rest of the world. Unfortunately, the 1965 Act came at the same time as the Great Society programs, when America was transformed into a massive welfare state. Well, that is obviously going to change not only the sort of immigrant you're getting, well, the 1965 Act did that through a series of complicated rules to bring in people from cultures as different from ours as possible, and as poor as possible, because again, they'll work for the rich and they'll vote Democrat. Nobody goes home. Why would anybody go home? Go on welfare. And they are voting 8-2 for the Democrats.
So what do we do about the H-1B visa issue? Because you talk about this, because one of the, like, Ted Cruz is very good on immigration, except for, legal, according to you, legal immigration and H-1B visas. H-1B visas are high-tech visas for people who don't pay attention to this stuff very closely. So can you explain the problem with the H-1B visa process and why even that needs to be curtailed according to your book?
Yes, yes. A lot of Republicans get stuck on this issue, so I won't attack Ted Cruz for it, because so many people, I mean, I keep having to, I'm going to have to get like a shock collar for Sean Hannity and a few other people who interview me, because they keep talking about illegal immigration, other than the first chapter of my book where I talk about amnesty, because that just ends the country overnight. Then it's lights out. The rest of my book doesn't particularly distinguish the Hmong immigrants up here in Fresno and out in Minnesota engaging in massive amounts of human smuggling, child rape, credit card theft, shooting hunters because they don't understand private property. This is explained with great sensitivity in the Minnesota papers. No, they're all legal immigrants. The Somalis voting for Al Franken and then going back to fight with ISIS, they're all legal. No, we are talking about the legal immigrants coming in, and the H-1B visas in particular are the ones that most Republicans have a soft spot for, mostly because we are lied to about, oh, there's just so high IQ, they have such gigantic brains. Incidentally, the only time I mention IQ in my book is to quote the ones who want the cheap labor on the H-1. Oh, they have such high IQs. It's just stunning. No, H-1B visas are being used, well, in the worst cases, to bring in concubines for Bali Reddy, Lucky Reddy, one of our model immigrants in San Francisco. He bought 12-year-old girls from their parents for sex, brought them in on H-1B visas. One died. This happened, I don't know, it's in the book, like 2001, 2002. I follow the news very closely. When I came across this, I called up my friends, many of whom also follow the news closely, and said, hey, did you hear about this case in San Francisco? An Indian immigrant bringing in 12-year-old girls he had bought from their parents for sex, which ended up sex with all of them at once. He also brought in his busboys. He had a lot of restaurants and real estate property. That story was not broken by the San Francisco Chronicle. In fact, both the police and the media brushed it under the rug. It was broken by a high school journalism class. They had not yet attended Columbia Journalism School and did not know. No, it's against our journalistic practice to report facts that are unpleasant about our model immigrants. So he's bringing in, busboys, janitors, and concubines under the H-1B. There's one category of how it's an utter fraud. Other category, even the ones who are doing the computer programming work. Well, no, they're not the stars. They're doing standard computer programming work. Unfortunately, Americans could do the same work, but they want to be paid. The way the H-1B visa works is it's tied to a particular employer. So if you come in to work for Mark Zuckerberg, and then, PayPal gives you a better offer, you can't leave without risking losing your visa. So you're tied to a particular employer. It's what's known in the law as indentured servitude, which this country abolished 100 years ago. Well, now the rich are bringing it back. And, we keep telling college students, oh, you got to major in one of the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math. Well, no, the STEM graduates, American STEM graduates, half of them are not employed in STEM fields. And their salaries haven't gone up for a decade now. Why? Because Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg are bringing in the computer programmers who can do regular. They just type away in their little cubby holes for 12 hours, collapse, go home, and go to sleep. It is just a scam for the rich.
Well, on the free trade side of that, there could be a counter-argument from the free trade side, which would be, okay, so if you don't do that, if you don't bring the immigrants from there, then they just relocate to India and they outsource like they've done to call centers, for example. So what is the counter to the free trade argument? Okay, well, I understand you're worried about American wages, but American companies could just leave and relocate in Hong Kong and hire everybody there for cheap wages.
They could. I don't think they would. We'll see. But the reason I even knew to look, because I kept reading about these high IQ. It's mostly Indians writing about Indians being the wonder, the stars of Silicon Valley. So one thing Indians don't have a problem with is self-esteem. But the reason I even knew to look was because one of my friends who runs a company was thinking of relocating his call centers, as probably many of you have discovered, to India. And he was the one who told me that India has a very flat bell curve, and that's why I looked up, what is the average Indian IQ? No, we by and large meet the smart ones. It's about the same as, I don't know, like Panama, the Sudan. It really isn't. This is just more low-wage work for the poor. And as for the trade issue particularly, I don't know, I think you might want to get them here, and it's not worth the trouble of having them over there. And but to the extent that happens, I don't know.
Okay, so
that's another issue. Somebody else can deal with that, but I know Americans aren't getting the jobs. I mean, I don't have a strong position on free trade. That's never been my thing.
Okay, so
I think it becomes kind of, I'm suspicious because the same people, because it's the same people who are so obsessed with who have been lying to me for 20 years about immigration, who say we need these trade deals like NAFTA. So I never really thought the sine qua non of being a conservative was making sure Mark Zuckerberg makes more money.
Okay, so with regard to the media, because you've referenced it a few times, one of the criticisms that your book has gotten is that there's so much anecdotal evidence, which is because, as you've stated, it's impossible to find statistics because they don't exist. But I did a little bit of research on the shooting that just happened up in San Francisco, and for the first 2 days of the shooting, the shooter was referred to only by his name of Texas. Francisco Sanchez of Texas.
Yes.
And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about how the media tends to treat these stories when they originally see them.
Oh,
because
yes.
It's amazing.
Well, what's interesting about the San Francisco case is that we did find out, by hook or crook, it was generally mentioned in the articles about Texas Man. It generally was at least mentioned he had already been deported 4 times. In my extensive research, I only found 2 other cases, or 2 cases, and now this one, where we found out very early on that the illegal immigrant who killed an American was an illegal immigrant, though the headline may still have been Texas Man. The other one was the Porky's director, who was driving in Pacific Palisades with his 22-year-old son, and a drunk illegal alien swerved straight into his lane, smashed him, killed him and his son. Immediately, the illegal alien and his passenger were fine. And I thought, there were articles, the LA Times was saying it was an illegal alien. And I, emailed some of my friends in Hollywood and said, why would this come? And I don't know, maybe it's just they considered Porky's such a reprehensible movie that anyone who killed the director, it doesn't reflect that badly on the illegal, but that one came out. And the other one happened a year earlier. It was an actress in her West Village apartment, Adrienne Shelley, and she was murdered by an illegal alien, and immediately, as soon as he was arrested a week later, immediately we all knew. And the only thing that separates those cases from most of the cases I write about is that they all happen in places where liberals might be. So I go back to my point that, oh no, the rich are perfectly willing to pay the costs of bringing in peasant cultures. That's because they don't pay the cost. No, they move their maids out to the suburbs. And they come in to clean the house and then go back and fill up your schools and your hospitals and rape your kids.
So in your book, one of the big issues, obviously, that you take on also, aside from the sort of media bias, is the fecklessness of the GOP on this issue. Why do you think that the GOP is pathologically incapable of taking on this issue in any real way?
I used to think it was cowardice. I now think it is pure stupidity. Pure stupidity.
It's a hell of a choice there.
I guess, yes, there could be so many things. And actually, if I could just get back to one other thing, the anecdotal examples aren't to prove the point. Chapter 7 is where you'll see, that was the chapter written through tears of frustration and rage, of how I describe. You go looking for basic crime facts. I mean, I think I do have some pretty good facts that aren't anecdotal. The U.S. Marshal's Most Wanted list. Take a look at that one. New York State prisons, they used to count, because again, prisons really do have to know. They may not publish it, but they do have to know the different ethnic groups, because they get into huge gang brawls in the prisons. And so I have the list of where people are from. From the New York prisons. I think that's pretty devastating. The main way I use the anecdotes isn't to prove the point, it's to attack the media. It's just mind-boggling how they hide. I have these, sprinkled throughout the book, these Spot the Immigrant chapters, where I'll give you the mainstream media article and, my comments throughout, and, you're completely convinced that, it's some farm boys up in Fresno who have gang raped these little 14-year-old girls, and only when you read the court transcripts 3 years later, oh my gosh, they're all Hmong. Why couldn't you tell us that? The San Francisco case I mentioned with model immigrant Bali Reddy, Lucky Reddy. That story was never mentioned in the New York Times. Never, never, never. How much ink has the New York Times spent on rapes that didn't happen by the Duke lacrosse team and UVA? How much ink was wasted on Ferguson, where Big Mike did not put his hands up and say, hands up, don't shoot? But actual cases of shocking, heinous gang rapes, incest rapes, child rapes going on in American communities, and for no reason. The media won't tell us about this. The Mexican gang rape case, it's one of the most hideous stories I've ever read. And again, I called my friends who follow not only the news, but crime as much as I do. And they did not know about this case. It started, I think, in the Clinton administration, ended during the Bush administration, and just the ugliest, most shocking gang rape of 2 little girls in Texas, led by an illegal alien. I did a full nexus search. The case went on for about a decade. Never was illegal immigrant or Mexican mentioned in relation to the main gang rapist, and this was the largest number of death penalty cases in Texas, which isn't shy about the death penalty, for about a half century. It was a pretty big case. There was one article in the New York Times about the case, but never did our media mention Mexican immigrant, much less illegal immigrant from Mexico, until they used the fact that the lead rapist was a Mexican to try to spring him from the death penalty. That is the first time 10 years later. And the full description of the first mention I found was, in a Texas case. That's how you're going to describe one of the most brutal gang rapes I've ever read about. So the point of all the anecdotal evidence isn't to prove the crime point, it's to prove our media is shockingly corrupt and lying to you, and you are going to have to demand information about immigration if we're ever going to get it. And back to the stupidity on the Republicans. No, I mean, after the fact that Trump has struck such a chord, do any of them have eyes? Don't they want to win? This is apparently a popular topic. I gave a speech out in Ontario, California last week, and I didn't realize, I mean, you know, they're nice people like you. Some of you might be Cruz supporters. Walker announced today. If any of you are Rubio supporters, we'll have a little chat about that. But I mentioned during the question and answer, I mentioned my fondness for Donald Trump, and the room exploded. They were so happy. It was 100% for Trump. And I mean, I can't say I believe he's going to be the nominee. For those of you who follow my work assiduously, you know that I'm constantly saying Republicans don't get distracted by someone who hasn't been a governor or at least a senator. It's not going to be the nominee. I don't know with Trump. If none of these Republicans pick up on this, it's just wide open there. And I wish, you know, my secret plan, and this comes out in the last chapter of my book. The one guy with a 20-year fantastic record on immigration is Mitt Romney. And I was very disappointed when he criticized Donald Trump, my new hero.
Well, when Romney comes in on the hang glider right into the middle of the race as the 17th candidate on that stage and just bumps Rick Santorum off, it'll be amusing.
I'm thinking people will see that debate and think, oh man, Romney was the best we ever had it. Maybe he could take Trump as his vice presidential nominee. But look, I mean, if it is Jeb Bush or Rubio, I'm not saying this in an angry or threatening way, you'd have to vote for Rubio, or rather for Hillary over those two. They are sole objective is Jeb and Rubio, their sole objective is to open the border and pass amnesty. At least with Hillary, she wants to socialize any other industries that haven't been socialized. She wants to lose wars for us abroad. She wants to take your children away, make, you know, abortion mandatory. Gay marriage mandatory, perhaps. There are a lot of items on her agenda. Whereas Jeb and Rubio single-mindedly focused on opening the border and passing amnesty. So if Trump isn't the nominee, I hope he does. I mean, if it's Jeb or Rubio, I hope he does run as a third-party candidate. So there's so I can make it clear what my vote is about.
In 2014, a lot of people voted specifically about this topic, and this was the deciding topic, and I heard a very prominent member of the Wall Street Journal editorial team assure an entire room, at least twice this size, that that topic was not even at issue in the 2014 election. And the question is, what should Republicans have done? What should they do? Let's say that, God forbid, Hillary Clinton wins, or it's somebody else on the Republican side who doesn't care about this issue, but there are people in Congress, let's say Republicans hold Congress. What should they do right now, for example, to stop Barack Obama's executive amnesty that they didn't do at the beginning of the year?
Well, they shouldn't fund it. There's that. But first of all, let's just quickly take the point, what was the 2014 election about? Tom Cotton in Arkansas beat a popular sitting Democratic senator by running against him on Obama's executive amnesty. Ben Sasse in Nebraska took out a field of candidates that I'm sure were very popular with the Wall Street Journal, businessmen who think that, you know, amnesty is a fine idea. Ben Sasse lapped both of them. He got more than the two of them combined. And of course, there was the famous election of Dave Bratt in Virginia, taking out, for the first time in history, a member of the leadership of Congress. Oh, and I'd also throw in here Scott Brown in Massachusetts, whom, if we were, you know, ranking races by level of difficulty, you know, the rest of them are doing somersaults compared to this guy who has to do, you know, a triple layover, flip off the shallow end of the pool. It was Scott Brown did incredibly well by raising the amnesty issue. It is popular with voters. It is not popular with, unfortunately, most of the people who control the media. And when the defunding of Obama's executive amnesty came up, the Republicans did try to fight it, and the Democrats did filibuster it for 3 weeks. But unless you were reading Breitbart, you didn't know about it. There was just no media attention to it. And now they've betrayed us on trade. My objection to the trade deal is it's a backdoor amnesty. It allows not only the free movement of goods, but the free movement of people. So a company can say, well, I need so many low-wage workers coming in to take these jobs. Republicans have a winning issue here if they would just talk about it. And look, the Ann Coulter rule is there are a lot of bad Republicans. There are no good Democrats. There are a fair number of Republicans in both the House and the Senate who are fantastic on amnesty, and we need to push them and elevate them, and people need to be more like them. And I also think we should take out one. This is what we as voters can do. They should stop being stupid. I think we only need to take out one of these guys, maybe John Boehner, just one of them. And again, as you know, if you assiduously follow my work, I harangued all of you to vote for the Republican, don't go for the Tea Party candidate, because really bad things happen when Democrats control the Congress. But I mean, that's why the Bratt thing was fantastic. And a lot of these Tea Party candidates, I'm not even sure I believe half of them, but they're not that good. They haven't run for anything before. We need to find a place where there is a good candidate to challenge a bad Republican. And that, as Voltaire said in Candide, we hang one to encourage the others.
So now I'm going to ask the apocalyptic question, which I know every Republican at this point has felt, which is, okay, what happens if we can't actually do anything? Because it feels like on every front, the President of the United States is doing whatever the hell he wants. There is no rule of law anymore. The Supreme Court obviously does not care about the rule of law. They're doing whatever they please. Congress is willing to abdicate whatever authority it has. They're just handing over the cash. So what do citizens do, and how fast is this going to turn very ugly?
That's a good question. I don't think it will turn any uglier than it is. I just feel like most Americans are hunkered down hoping it will all go away. But it's not going to go away, and the winning path to follow is Pete Wilson in 1994. And look, it's Americans who have shut down 3 amnesties in the last decade. It wasn't because, you know, some major network or newspaper was alerting you to it. The American people would somehow, by hook or crook, find out, oh my gosh, they're doing it again. They're trying to pass an amnesty, and they 3 times now shut down the congressional switchboard. Well, you may have to shut down your newspaper switchboards or your TV network switchboards and make it clear this is what we want to hear about, because this is all that matters in so many ways. And even to the Democrats, I'd say, I mean, I'm assuming this is a Republican audience, that's why I talk about how it is just,